Hello, this is Robert with Supervision. We're going to be covering a topic of ethics today. So first of all, I would like to welcome you to Supervision. And like I said, we're going to be talking about some ethical aspects. What I'm going to be doing this session is really reviewing what is in the American Counselors Association Ethical Code, the guideline that we go by. So we're currently under the 2014 edition, and this was of course approved for by the ACA, the governing council there. There you'll see a copy of the cover of the code, and it is technically just a book. And so for all of my associates that I've asked you guys to watch this, we're going to be covering the book, the code. So we have to ask the question, why do we even have a code? Well, there's some really good reasons why we have a code. In my experience, I have seen some highly questionable behavior amongst LPCs. It may not have been enough to get them in trouble, but at the same time, it was what led me to become a supervisor. Years ago, I saw some immature and bordering on unethical behavior of a various nature. I'm not going to go into detail on it today. It's not necessary, but it is important to know that we have to have this code. There's a reason for it. So the ACA, this is taken straight from them. Code of Ethics purpose, the reason to answer the question why. Just read through this. 6 main purposes. Number 1, the code sets forth the ethical obligations of ACA members and provides guidance intended to inform the ethical practice of professional counselors. It doesn't matter if you're an ACA member or not, this code applies to you as a professional counselor. And if you're in the state of Texas, there's some other stuff we'll be covering later on in another video. Number 2, the code identifies ethical considerations relevant to professional counselors and counselors in training. Number 3, right there, the code enables the association to clarify for current and prospective members and for those served by members the nature of ethical responsibilities held in common by its members. Number 4, the code serves as an ethical guide designed to assist members in constructing a course of action that best serves those utilizing counseling services and establish expectations of conduct with a primary emphasis on the role of the professional counselor. Expectations of conduct. That's what led me to becoming a supervisor, was because I was seeing conduct that I thought was just not acceptable for the field and the profession. Number 5, the code helps us support the mission of the ACA. If you have more questions about that, feel free to go through the ACA's website and look that one up. It's kind of outside the scope of this video. Number 6, the standards in this code serve as the basis for processing inquiries and ethic complaints concerning ACA members. We're held to this standard, guys. This is not something that you can just sort of make the statement that rules are meant to be broken or a code is a guideline. No, it is a guideline, but it is also a hard rule. As we go through these, you'll say, well, is it really that big of a deal? And yeah, it is. Okay, so the layout of the ACA code follows these sections. Section A is what we're going to be looking at today for the counseling relationship. And then B, confidentiality and privacy. I'll make another video for it. Section C, professional responsibility. D, relationship with other professionals. In other words, how does your relationship between you and another counselor, how does that work, and how we're supposed to behave amongst other counselors? Section E discusses evaluation, assessment, and interpretation of those assessments. Section F is supervision, training, and teaching, which would fall under the category that I'm in now as a supervisor and performing training. That's what this would be. Any of these videos would be considered training videos. Section G, research and publication. Section H, distance counseling, technology, and social media. And then Section I, resolving ethical issues, how to fix an ethical dilemma when you run into one. And trust me, you will at some point in time as you remain an associate, an LPC associate, and then move into being a full licensed LPC. You're going to run into ethical issues and dilemmas, and there's a way to fix those problems when you do. All right, so Section A, client welfare. This is not exactly the largest section, but I would have to say it's probably one of the more important sections for you to know as a new supervisee, a new LPC associate. So section, and you're going to see as we go through these, I did not copy and go through every one of these. We're only going to look at a couple of highlights, okay? Ones that I consider to be extremely valuable that you need to be aware of. Section A, 1A, primary responsibility. Respect and dignity, guys. You have to promote the welfare of your client. There is what we would refer to as a fiduciary responsibility. I'm sure that's a term you learned in school. And that means you are financially responsible as a servants to the client to look after their well-being and to uphold their dignity and to respect that. Section A, 1B, records and documentation. Counselors create, safeguard, and maintain documentation necessary for rendering professional services, regardless of the medium. In other words, the way that you do that. Counselors include sufficient and timely documentation to facilitate the delivery and continuity of services. Now, notice it goes on to say that you will take reasonable steps to ensure the documentation accuracy, reflects client progress, services provided. If amendments are made to records and documentation, counselors take steps to properly note the amendment according to agency and institutional policies. Let me take a moment and discuss that with a little more clarity. There is a right way to add information, and it happens. You're going to be doing a note, and then you're going to close it out. If you're doing it digitally, you'll close it out, and then your supervisor will go look at it, to review it, to sign off on it, whatever's needed, and they'll be like, oh, hey, you forgot this one section, you need to add that. You have to go in and point out the date and time that you added. You put in the word addendum or additional information, however your organization requires it to be done, and then you add it, sign it and date it as an additional note. You can't just open a note and add. Every time you do that, it's going to record it, that something was added. You want to be very clear and very open about what you're doing so it doesn't raise any questions or red flags about, hey, are you doing something that's a little bit questionable? Are you doing something that is a little fishy looking or sounding? Okay, A2A. Guys, this one's a big one. Informed consent. Your client has freedom and the right to choose whether to enter into or stay in a relationship with you, and they need adequate information. You have an obligation to review in writing, verbally with the client, their rights and responsibilities. What I have in my practice is when they receive their information to sign, they receive my policies and procedures on what is expected of them and everything else. They sign off on it. When they come into my office, I review it with them verbally, and then I hand them a copy of it. So that way it's signed and delivered. Section A2D. You'll notice that I am not following all of them. So I have skipped over B and C. I want to point this out because there are other things in here that I'm not covering. This is a shortened version. So, okay, when you're dealing with someone who has no ability to give consent, in other words, a minor, you have to get it from somewhere else. Inability to give consent when counseling minors, incapacitated adults, or other persons unable to give voluntary consent. You seek assistance of clients to services, include them in decision making as appropriate. Counselors recognize the need to balance the ethical rights of clients to make choices, their capacity to give consent or assent to receive services, and parental or familial legal rights and responsibilities to protect these clients, make decisions on their behalf. If you're in a situation where you are dealing with law enforcement, this might apply. If you're dealing with minors, this might apply. There are times when people's rights are removed from them legally and they can get placed under an emergency detention order, and you have to go talk to them. They may be very angry with the fact that their consent to give their permission has been removed. Your agency will help you understand how to deal with that, and we can talk more in our face-to-face sessions at that time on that topic. Okay, another part of Section A is prohibited non-counseling roles and relationships. Guys, this one's not difficult. It really isn't. It's really kind of scary to me about how many LPCs lose their license annually, every year, because of this problem. Section A5A, sexual and or romantic relationships prohibited. That means no, you can't do it. Sexual and or romantic counselor-client interactions or relationship with current clients, romantic partners, or their family members are prohibited. This prohibition applies to both in-person and electronic interaction or client relationships. Section A5B, previous romantic relationships also prohibited. So in other words, what that means is if you have a client that shows up at your facility that you had been in a relationship with at any point in the past, you have to let your supervisor know, whoever's assigning you the case, you can't see them. It's that simple. I have had that happen to me when years ago I was working at a facility. I noticed the name, I thought it looked familiar. I went to the unit, I spotted them from a distance, and I had to go tell my supervisor, sorry, I can't see this person. I have known this person previously by about 10 years. So they had to reassign that case. It's not a big deal, just you can't follow up with them. Okay, Section A5C, romantic relations with former clients. This one can get a little bit strange. This one's been changed. It used to be a 2-year, it got extended to 5 years. Here's the deal on this one, as far as I look at it. While you are an LPC associate under supervision with me, the minimum time frame we can be together is 18 months. The maximum is 60 months. That's how long your associate status can last. That's 5 years, guys, which means there is no reason at any point in time during your time period as an LPC associate that you should ever connect with a former client, period. There's no reason for it. Okay, now I want to point out one thing here that it's in highlight. This prohibition applies to both in-person and electronic interactions or relationships. Counselors, before engaging in sexual and or romantic interactions or relationships with former clients, their romantic partner, or their family members, right here, demonstrate forethought and document in written format whether the interaction or relationship can be viewed as exploitive. In other words, you have to create a document and save it about how you have contemplated that this could be bad or not in their best interest, not in their welfare. The whole point of that is to get you to slow down and think before you follow through, okay? I want to point out, nothing derogatory towards the individual, but as a client, you have an unbelievable amount of influence over that individual. Okay? It is so easy to misuse that power that's why I just tell people, no, that's not going to happen. It's not safe for anyone, and it's not healthy. So if in the future you find yourself bumping into someone, you had been their counselor, their therapist, and 5 years has gone by and you want to strike up a relationship, you're going to have to write a letter and record how you've contemplated what the possible outcomes could be of exploiting and harm. Okay? So you want to think about that one very carefully. Okay, group settings. If you're working at the facilities, the local hospitals, you're going to be doing some groups. Okay? Groups are an amazing form of therapy. It's one of my favorite setups and modalities. I absolutely enjoy group work. However, at the same time, Section A, 9B, tells us that we have to protect each member within that group. So reading this one, it says protecting clients in a group setting, counselors take responsible precautions or reasonable precautions to protect clients from physical, emotional, or psychological trauma. In other words, if you're running a group and you've got an aggressive client in there who may throw chairs or tables or other things, you have to protect those folks from that individual. If you have a group who has a hypersexual individual who is in a current active manic episode, you've got to protect that one from someone else in the group who might take advantage of that sexual opportunity. Okay? It puts you as the client's protector and the counselor in a very interesting situation. We have to sometimes block people from putting out too much information and protect them from themselves in some ways. This one's important. Termination and referrals. When you are finished with counseling, when it has ended. Now, working at the hospital system, you're going to find that oftentimes they discharge and you came in the next morning and you didn't even know. That happens. Okay, that's a part of discharge planning, and hopefully the facility you're at has someone whose job it is to get them referrals for follow-up. In most cases, they have to have one 10 days after discharge. If that's your job to get, then make sure you get it done. Section A, 11A, competence within termination and referral. If counselors lack competence to be a professional assistance to clients, they avoid entering or continuing counseling relationships. Guys, this one's kind of hitting home. If you don't feel able to help, then you really need to look at making that referral. Send them somewhere else. Okay, that's why for myself, if I'm dealing with someone who has, for example, an eating disorder, I refer that one out. I have very little experience with eating disorders. I do have a lot of experience in trauma work, but eating disorders are unique. So you want to be very careful with that one. If the client, however, denies or declines the termination and referral and wants to continue working with you, you have to then get supervision and more training. Get help. It is a requirement. All right, so Section A, 11B, values within termination and referral. Counselors refrain from referring prospective and current clients based solely on the counselor's personally held values, attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors. So I'm going to kind of condense this one down. Basically, what this one is saying is if you have a client and you don't like them, that's not enough of a reason to refer them out. Okay? If they are of a different belief system, a different creed, a different nationality, that's not enough of a reason. It just isn't. Okay? We have to check ourselves at the door and make sure our biases and our own problems are not influencing our counseling. And that's hard to do. Okay? So sometimes you're going to have to be really cautious, but also recognize you can't dump them, you can't just let them go because they make you uncomfortable or you have other issues with that individual in some other way. Section A11C, appropriate terminations. Guys, there's a right way to do this. Counselors terminate a counseling relationship when it becomes reasonably apparent that the client no longer needs you, or by keeping them, you're finding that it can actually cause them more problems. Okay, if you're putting them in jeopardy or of harm by the client or another person with whom the client has a relationship, or when the clients do not pay fees as agreed upon, not really enough of a reason, guys. You have to make sure that you're doing it right. Now, I do put into my policies and procedures when people come in what is called ghosting. I let them know that if they ghost on me after 2 to 3 sessions, if I don't hear back from them and I've reached out, I'll discharge them. I have to take them off my books. They've ghosted. They've moved on. They have the right to do that. It makes it difficult on me as the counselor to help them, because if they're not coming in, there's not much I can do. But we still have to terminate services if they're just not coming in. Okay, the next one is real important when it comes to termination, and that would be under the category of abandonment or client neglect, and that's section A12. You don't do it. Counselors do not abandon or neglect clients in counseling. We assist in making appropriate arrangements for the continuation of treatment when necessary during interruptions such as vacations, illnesses, and following discharge or termination of services. If you go on a vacation, if you take time off and you're working in a facility where your caseload may change from week to week, usually not that big of a deal. But once you move into a private practice setting, going on vacation is a very big deal. Okay, how long are you going to be gone? Where are you going? You have to have arrangements for your clients to have someone to contact for follow-up service. So it's something to take into account. Okay, we have just now covered an abridged version of Section A of the American Counseling Association's Code of Ethics. That does it for this one. I'm going to be covering Section B real soon, and we'll be able to talk more about those ethical aspects. So again, I'd like to say thank you for coming into supervision. If you're one of my LPC associates, I will be meeting up with you in face-to-face session at some point in the next week or so, and keep it up.